Hello, everybody. Today we're going to conclude this week's talk on second base, on this idea that we've run from home, where we get our relationship with God right, to first base, where we find character. We round first base, we head to second base, where we're investing into others. And hopefully yesterday you were really thinking through some of the questions that we were asking, because I think there was some real intentionality and some hard work that could be done that can really help us grow as people. Yesterday's question was, how do you view others? How do you view people? Your perception of how you view people says a lot about where your heart is. Will say a lot about how you act towards others. And we know that loving others is a really, really big deal. Then the follow-up question became, how does God view people? And we spent some time looking at Jesus' reaction as his heart broke, looking at others, the compassion, the love that he has as he saw those people in Matthew 9. If you remember, we were looking at this idea that he loves us so much that his heart breaks as he watches us get dinged up and battle through life. Did you see that when Jesus responded, looking at the crowd? When he looked out over the crowds, his heart broke, so confused and aimless they were, like sheep with no shepherd. So this is where we really need to take a moment and really start to slow down. When Jesus looked at people, his love for them, his compassion for them, his heart for them was very apparent. He values people. He sees them. He loves them. His heart broke for them as they struggled through life. And this is so important. When you look at people, what do you see? When you look at people, does your heart break for them? Do you see value in the other humans around you? Do you see a broken and beautiful heart in front of you? Or are you just seeing those stepping stones or roadblocks in others that we talked about yesterday? How you view people is a huge indicator of where your heart is at. And it says so much about how you're walking through life. So the big question of the day really is this, and it's really the question of this whole talk this week. When you look at people, what do you see? If you're taking this moment and you're doing that heart work, where you're really looking inward and you're realizing when you look at people, you're seeing stepping stones or roadblocks rather than what God sees, you know that life is still about you at that point. And it's good to see that. And I think it's an important part of our growing up process to be aware of where we're at. Remember what Pete Scazzaro told us, with no awareness, there comes no change. I wouldn't know that I need to change anything. So that's a good step forward for you to see that in your lives. And if you want to change that, if you want to get to this place where you view others the way God views others, well, there's only really one way to do that. There's only one way to change that self-focus and shift it to God focus. And I'm going to tell you something now that's going to shock you. If you're around me long enough, you know I bring this up every week. But in the end, if you want to get to this place where you have the same view of others that God does, you have to spend time with God. There's only one way to shift self-focus and turn it into God-focused lives, and that's to spend time with Him. Jesus says this in Matthew 6:6. Love this in the Message version. Here's what I want you to do. Find a quiet, secluded place so that you won't be tempted to role play before God. Just be there as simply and honestly as you can manage. The focus will shift from you to God, and you will begin to sense His grace. Remember, in the end, this life is about God and what He's doing, not you and what you want. And the only way to get to this place where we can have this focus shift off of ourselves and onto God and onto this love, to get to this place where we can sense His grace, is to spend enough time with Him to allow His love in such a way that our focus now centers on Him. We have to get to this place where the focus shifts off of us and onto Him, or we will never sense His grace, and we will continue to just trample out over others, leaving a wake of pain and heartache everywhere we go. So you need to ask yourself this. Where are you at with all of this? How do you view others? Can you see what God sees in those around you? Can you see the value of those around you? Or are you trampling all over them to beat them to what you think might be that last loaf of bread ever to be delivered to giant ever in the history of the world? Can you see how important these people are? I know you don't work with people, right? A lot of people say that. Like, I'm in construction, I don't work with people. Well, think about it. You work with people. I know you don't work with people and you don't like the people stuff, but in the end, this is all about people and their eternal destinies, because everything in life is about God and what He's doing. And what He's doing is holding back the end of time so everybody can come to know Him in a real way. Everything is about people and what they're doing and what God is doing to save them, to have them experience His love. See, when you surrender your life to God and develop the character needed to live as God intended and view people as God does, well, now we're ready to run to third base where we find results. And it's those results in life that everybody wants, right? How you view and how you treat others is such a big deal, and it will say so much about who you are and so much about how you're walking through life. And it's really interesting that as we walk through life and we look at it through the lens of this game of baseball analogy, I think we get some of it, right? Like, we get the God stuff at home plate. We get that everything starts and ends at home with God. But I think where we get into trouble is that we don't mind running to first and get the character stuff, but the whole idea of investing into people really becomes a challenge. See, once we think we're good as people, like once we do the loving God thing, this happens to a lot of Christians, right? We do the loving God thing, we start doing some inner work, and we get to this place where we think to ourselves, well, I'm good. Well, then I think we lose interest in running to second base, where we would invest into others. And I think that's why we see so many people hurt by Christians, right? You know a lot of people that have been hurt by Christians somewhere along the line, right? And by the way, they're good people who love God, but I think somewhere along the way they think they're good or that they've arrived in some way, and they're not really interested in serving or loving on other people. See, we see this in good Christian men and women who run their own businesses, right? They make it a God thing, and then they just trample out all over everybody to get to where they want to go next. And unfortunately, at times, we can see this festering up in our churches and in our communities. Pride pushes in on us, and it hits us. And once we get to first base, and we're kind of like, you know what, heading to third now. Right? We want to skip over the people thing, or maybe trample out over the people thing, and just run to the results that we all want. But the reality is that you were created by God to be with people. You need people in your life. And we also need to understand that Jesus told us we need to love God and we need to love others. It's a big deal. It's the two most important things we can do. And on top of that, it says so much about who we are as people by how we're viewing others. We are to love others the way God loved us, right? And we are to view people the way God views us and views people too. Second base seems like a long cut to results, doesn't it? We just want to go from home to first, right to third, and go get those results. But it is an essential step towards our spiritual development. After all, we are commanded by God to love God and to love others. We are commanded by Him to do so. So I want you to ask yourself this question today, and I want you to take this to heart. How do you view others? You see how God does. Where are you at with this? This is a big deal. And once we get this down at second, we can finally go get those results at third that Ken will be talking to you about next week.